Hello everyone, my name is Sameeksha and welcome to my presentation on insecure direct object references. In this presentation, we'll be learning about what is IDOR, how does IDOR work, examples of IDOR, impact of IDOR, preventing IDOR, practicals, and a conclusion. What is IDOR? IDOR stands for Insecure Direct Object Reference. An insecure direct object reference vulnerability is a type of security flaw that allows an attacker to access protected data or resources by manipulating a reference to an object in a web application. In web applications, objects or resources such as files, records, or user profiles are often stored and accessed during unique identifiers or references. For example, a user's profile may be identified by a numeric ID or a file name might be associated with a specific document. In case of an IDOR vulnerability, the web application fails to properly enforce authorization and access controls when handling these object references. As a result, the attacker can manipulate the references, typically through parameters in URLs or form inputs to access objects they are not authorized to view or modify. So, how does IDOR work? First, the attacker identifies a web application that uses user supplied input to construct direct references to objects. The attacker manipulates the user supplied input in order to access an object that they would not normally be authorized to access. The attacker then uses the object to gain access to protected data or resources. To understand IDOR better, here is an example. Imagine an e-commerce website that allows an authenticated user to edit their profile through a URL like this: shop.example.com edit profile user ID 5678. Now, assuming that the attacker is an authenticated user, they could change the request and, for example, increment the user ID parameter shop.example.com edit profile user ID equal to 5679. If the application does not check whether the requesting user has authorization to edit the profile associated with the manipulated user ID, the attacker could gain unauthorized access to alter another user's profile. Another example would be a website displays a user's bank account details through a URL like this: bank.example.com account ID equal to 12345. Here, ID equal to 12345 is the insecure object reference. If an attacker suspects an IDOR vulnerability, they might change the ID value to account ID equal to 12346. If the application does not have proper access controls in place, the attacker could gain access to another user's account by simply manipulating the ID. Here is a picture representation on how IDOR works. The hacker first identifies web applications using direct object references and requests verified information. Valid HTTP request is executed and direct object reference entity is revealed. The object reference entity is manipulated and HTTP request is performed again. HTTP request is performed without user verification and hacker is granted access to sensitive information. Now that we know what IDOR is and how it works, let us know the impact of IDOR: unauthorized access to sensitive information. Attackers can exploit IDOR vulnerabilities to gain access to personal and sensitive information, such as user credentials, financial data, or private records that should be accessible by authorized users. Data manipulation. Once an attacker has access to sensitive data, they may be able to modify, update, or otherwise tamper with the data, causing integrity issues and potentially impacting business processes. Data deletion. In some cases, a successful IDOR exploit can lead to an attacker deleting critical records or files, causing permanent data loss and potentially disrupting business operations. Privilege escalation. By exploiting IDOR vulnerabilities, an attacker can access data or resources linked to users with higher privileges, effectively escalating their own privileges within the application. Reputation damage and loss of trust. Data breaches and unauthorized access to sensitive information can have negative consequences for a company's reputation and customer trust, potentially leading to loss of businesses and legal repercussions. So, how do we prevent IDOR? Do not use user supplied input to construct direct references to objects. Instead, use a well defined API or function to access objects. Validate and sanitize all user supplied input before using it to construct references to objects. Use access control mechanisms to restrict access to sensitive data and resources. Use a web application firewall to help detect and block IDOR attacks. Let us now go through this practical to understand IDOR in simple terms. As you can see, we have an invoice of a person named Sean Johnson. This is how his invoice looks like. If you look at the URL above, we can see that the URL here is invoice ID equal to 1. Now that we know that this web application is susceptible to IDOR, let us tamper with the URL ID from 1 to 5. As we can see, this website is indeed vulnerable to IDOR, as not only we were able to change the URL ID to 5, but also we were able to gain another person's invoice. This clearly states that this particular website is vulnerable to IDOR and hackers can manipulate the data for their own benefits. Conclusion. IDOR vulnerabilities are a serious security risk and they can be difficult to detect and fix. To prevent IDOR vulnerabilities, organizations should carefully validate and sanitize all user supplied input before using it to construct references to objects. They should also use access control mechanisms to restrict access to sensitive data and resources. By following these steps, organizations can help to prevent IDOR vulnerabilities and protect their web applications from attack. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.